Why do I believe the resurrection occurred? Well, there's a lot of reasons. First of all, resurrections are possible. Why? Because the greatest miracle in the Bible has already occurred, the creation of the universe out of nothing. We have good scientific and philosophical evidence that the first verse of the Bible is true. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If that verse is true, every other verse is at least possible. Now, what evidence do we have that the New Testament documents are telling the truth? To remember things, I like to alliterate them. So there are 6 lines of evidence that all begin with the letter E that will help you remember them. First of all, we have early testimony. Most, if not all, the New Testament documents are written prior to 70 AD. Second, we have eyewitness testimony. There's over 140 details just in the second half of the book of Acts and the Gospel of John that we know are eyewitness details that only an eyewitness could know. Thirdly, after early and eyewitness, we have embarrassing details. You go, what are embarrassing details? If there's something in the text that's embarrassing to the author or authors, it's probably true. Why? Because people don't like to make up embarrassing details about themselves. They like to hide them. Consider one particular embarrassing detail. At the crucifixion, the disciples run away while the women are the brave ones. Now, who wrote the New Testament documents down? Men. Now, what man is going to admit that he was hiding for fear of the Jews while the women went down and discovered the empty tomb? Nobody would do that. In fact, if they were making up the story, they would say they marched right down there and moved that elite Roman guard out of the way. And then they saw Jesus, who congratulated them on their great faith. And then they went and comforted the trembling women. They wouldn't make up the fact that they were cowards. This is not an invented story. There are several other details, too, that are embarrassing, not only in the New Testament, but also the Old Testament. Fourthly, we have excruciating testimony. We get that word excruciating. It means out of the crucifixion, which is the argument that says that these men who were in a position to know whether Jesus had risen from the dead died brutal deaths when they could have saved themselves by simply saying, no, it never happened. They were living excruciating lives. These Jews who thought they were God's chosen people, why would they do this unless Jesus had risen from the dead? They had no motive to do it. Also, number 5, we have expected testimony. What that means is there's Old Testament prophecies that prophesy about a coming Messiah. And if I only had one Old Testament prophecy to make my case on, it would be Isaiah chapter 53. If you've never read Isaiah chapter 53, go read it. You will see it is an uncanny description of what Jesus did for us, yet it's written 700 years in advance. And we know it's earlier than Christ because it's the greatest of the Dead Sea Scrolls, 24 feet long. So we have expected testimony. And finally, we have extra-biblical testimony. There are 10 ancient non-Christian sources within 150 years of Jesus' life that mention Jesus and the apostles very briefly. And they say the same basic story the New Testament documents say, that his disciples believed Jesus rose from the dead and they believed he was God and they were willing to die for their beliefs. Now, how could this be invented when you even have non-Christian writers admitting the disciples believed all this? I don't have enough faith to believe that the New Testament documents are not telling us the basic truth about Jesus. He really did rise from the dead for my sins and for yours.